I had a wonderful dream the other night. I dreamt I was living in a tree in a forest, and the tree was my home. And the tree took sunshine and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and that tree produced oxygen and food for me. And I had this wonderful feeling as I was living in this tree, my home, that I was in a natural balance with the environment around me, with the forest. And it felt in my dream as though that balance could last forever. But then I woke up and I realized actually this was probably a dream that one of my ancestors had a very, very long time ago, probably 10 million years ago. But it did get me to thinking about some of my more recent ancestors and how they lived, what their homes were like, and what their impact was on the environment. Now, I come from the UK, and about 1,000 years ago, this might have been the type of home I lived in. Okay, I wasn't living in a tree then, but I was living in a building that was made from trees and plants. And so myself and my community were probably still in a pretty good natural balance with our environment. So let's move forward to today now. And here I welcome you not so much to my dream as our collective nightmare. So what are our buildings like today? Are they good for our environment? Are they good for our health and well-being? Well, in a lot of cases, I don't think so. Take this high-rise estate in China, or this aerial view of a very large suburb in America. These developments are having an enormous impact on our planet. And here in Australia, the buildings that we're designing and constructing in the thousands now, they are having negative impacts. In Australia, our homes are big. In fact, on average, they're the biggest in the world. And they will definitely have negative impacts on the environment. They require lots of air conditioning and heating to keep us comfortable, for example. So here's the big idea. It's the big idea of the living building. I would like us to move towards a new paradigm, a paradigm where our homes and our other buildings are not just sustainable, but they're actually restorative. So they are actually restoring the damage, or some of the damage, that we've been doing to our environment and that we continue to do to our environment. So this big idea is a vision that's already held by thousands of passionate people around the world. And it's the idea that living buildings are buildings that are as efficient as a natural organism like a tree, for example. So a living building is a building that is very well placed in its environment and its local climate. It's self-sufficient in energy and water. It's made from materials that are perfectly safe and environmentally benign. And this building, this living building, provides health benefits for the people in and around the building, but also the environment. And like all living things, a living building is a beautiful thing. So here's a new building in Australia. It's called the Sustainable Buildings Research Centre, or the SBRC. And I'm privileged to work there alongside 50 other researchers at the Innovation Campus at the University of Wollongong. And this building is one of the most sustainable buildings in Australia. Not only that, but I'm also quietly confident that very soon this will be the very first building to be given accreditation under the International Living Building Challenge. Now, the Living Building Challenge is a really tough new framework for assessing the sustainability and the restorative performance of our buildings. And there are only 15 buildings, 15 buildings, around the world that have been fully certified under the Living Building Challenge up till now. So the design team, including members of the SBRC team, the design team for the SBRC building used ecologically sustainable design principles to make this building as efficient as possible. So just like a tree, which gives this wonderful shade in the sun, this SBRC building has great shading. And it's predominantly naturally ventilated, which means we reduce our need for air conditioning and heating in the building. And inside the building, we have great daylighting so that we've almost eliminated the need for artificial light during the daytime. The SBRC building, like a tree, again, it harvests solar energy. And the 160 kilowatt solar array that's on the roof of the building means that the SBRC building is a net zero energy building. So that means that the relatively small amount of energy that we have to import from the grid is more than offset by clean renewable energy that we generate on site and export to the grid. And the SBRC building's like a tree in another way too. It has a root system, and that root system goes 90 meters into the ground, and we circulate water down through our ground source heat exchanger so that we can take thermal energy out of the ground in winter and use it to heat the building. And in summer, we take excess thermal energy in the building and transfer it to the ground. And we've tried, as far as possible, to reduce the embodied energy and the embodied impacts of constructing this building. So those impacts come from when you manufacture and then have to transport the materials that we use to construct that building to site. So in the case of the SBRC building, we've tried to use locally sourced materials and recycled and reused materials. So here we see reused bricks, we see reused power poles, we also have railway line and other materials. The green walls and the green roofs in the building help produce oxygen, and they improve the air quality inside and outside the building. And the SBRC collects all the rain that falls on its roof. It collects, purifies and stores that water, and we use it throughout the building. And importantly, we also treat all our wastewater on site. So unlike nearly all other buildings, we even treat that black toxic sludge that is discharged to the sewer, which is our community sewer system. Here, we actually use natural processes such that all we get out of our black water treatment system is relatively clean water that we use to water the gardens. And the gardens are important too, because a living building needs to produce nourishment for its occupants and perhaps some other people as well, just as a tree nourishes its local environment. So here you see some of the SBRC team tending our urban agriculture gardens. Yes, you've got to get your hands down and dirty in that beautiful soil. And they produce these wonderful vegetables that we add to our meals that we have at the SBRC. And we try to eat together often. A group of people who are connected to their building and connected to the environment. And that's another very important part of this idea of living buildings and living communities. And the SBRC team would like to improve the performance of the SBRC building even further using some of the technologies that we're researching now, like these types of facades that automatically respond to the changes in the local weather and the thermal environment around the building. And in the future, who knows, maybe we'll actually use some of the technologies where we are sequestering or capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, like this building in Hamburg, where algae is being grown in the glass facade. So the algae takes sunlight and carbon dioxide, produces oxygen and biomass. So that biomass could either, which is the algae, could either be used as a fuel or perhaps even a building material of the future. So while we're talking about growing algae, perhaps someday in the future you'll be able to grow your own living home. So why does this big idea matter? Well, it's because of something that we often seem to forget. We too often forget. And that is that our biosphere on this planet is limited. It's relatively small. It's fragile. So, for example, 80% of the mass of air in our atmosphere is held in a thin layer on the surface of this Earth, and the thickness of that layer is equivalent to just 1/1000th of the diameter of this planet of ours. So at the scale of this scale model of the Earth, the thickness of that layer of air is equivalent to the thickness of a credit card. That's all. So we need to take far better care of this precious, fragile layer of air and of the fragile layer of life that exists on the surface of this Earth. So this idea of living buildings is important because I believe we need to move to a point where the buildings of the future are actually of benefit to the environment, not a burden. And I believe that we need to make the dream of restoring that balance between the human race and our natural world a reality. And I believe that living buildings will play a major part in that reality.